What's up guys, my name's Caleb with Pembroke Turf Management, and today I wanted to talk about my favorite weed killers and how to use them both safely and effectively. There's some additional considerations you're going to need to take in order to use these products over what you might find at Lowe's or Home Depot. So I thought it'd be a good idea to create a video showing you guys how to use them the right way. That way you can kick it off with your feet running the first time instead of fumbling around trying to figure out what all you need to make these products work the best that they can. So with that being said, let's dive right into it. All right, so the first topic we're going to talk about is something known as integrated pest management, or IPM for short. Now, what the heck does that mean? Basically, it's an environmentally sensitive approach to using stuff like this. It's not something that's just for hippies, right? We think about, gotta protect the environment. Everybody's talking about that nowadays, but it's a process that makes sense, and really it involves 4 essential steps. So the first step being the action threshold. So, when do you need to go out and take care of this problem that you have with these chemicals? You need to make sure you understand, if I just have one weed, I don't need to be going out there and doing a broadcast spray. For those of you that might not know, broadcast spray just means you're spraying the entire surface at the same time, so like your whole yard. Whereas you might go and just spot spray that one little piece of crabgrass with your quinclorac here, and you don't need to broadcast it. So when does it become enough of a problem that you need to go and take care of it? All right, so the second part of IPM is identification. How do you know what you're spraying? Basically is the point of this section. It's the single most important thing to using these products, because some of them are more effective on certain things than others. For example, Dismiss NXT is going to be really good on Kalinga and sedges, and so is Certainty. Whereas if you apply Celsius over here on your sedges, it's not going to do a whole lot, if anything. So you have to know what your weed is, what your target pest is that you're out there trying to get rid of. The best way to figure this out that I've found is to use ChatGPT. You can snap a picture on your phone, upload it to the AI. It's going to do its thing and spit out what it thinks it is, and you can go fact check that result online. If you're still not sure, you can always go and reference some material from your local extension agency. Here in Georgia, UGA's got some fantastic stuff we can use down south. There's an app I used to use called Plant Finder. I can link that in the description. You can take a picture and it takes a guess. But knowing what weed you have will let you be effective with these chemicals, because they're all what's known as a selective herbicide, with the exclusion of Ranger Pro, which is an off-brand version of Roundup, which is, of course, the active ingredient is glyphosate. All pretty familiar. That'll just kill just about anything you put it on. So you got to be real careful with that. The third component of IPM is prevention. So why did these weeds pop up in the yard? Is there something you could do to perhaps prevent that? That way you're not having to go out there and do all these extra things. In most cases, yes. Applying a pre-emergent is industry standard. So, you want to make sure you get that down, and then you're kind of covered on the prevention aspect. Sometimes if there's a heavy rain, it could wash out, a little bit of that layer in there. Or maybe you go and aerate your yard, poke a bunch of holes in the ground. Now you've broken the barrier for your pre-emergent, so you need to apply more. But it's important to understand why it happens. So the fourth part of this is the easy one, which is known as control. So this is what's your action? You're going to go out there and spray them. Pretty self-explanatory, but that's the final step of the IPM process. So now that we understand what IPM is, we know how to make educated decisions and educated actions on what we need to do for our property to take care of this weed problem. So before we even get into the herbicides, it's really important to think about safety and PPE. So we're gonna dive into that now. All right, so now that we're diving into the safety and PPE topic, your personal protective equipment, the number one thing you need to understand about this is reading the label. The label is the law. You have to understand the label. It's gonna tell you everything you need to know about these chemicals, what equipment to wear when you're mixing it, when you're spraying it, where you can spray it, where you can't spray it, what it works on, what it doesn't work on, what rate to put it out at, literally everything. And it's the law. So it's an abiding contract between you and the chemical manufacturer and what they put on that label for you to follow it. So, think about a situation where maybe you're spraying around a koi pond or something somewhere, or you've got one in your backyard or whatever. If you do, that's pretty freaking cool. I want one. But at any rate, if you put that chemical out there, maybe you didn't read the label and it's toxic to fish. Next time it rains, guess what's gonna happen? that chemical is going to leach into your pond and kill all your fish or your neighbor's fish or whoever. So that's why it's really important to understand that label. All right, moving on from all the label talk, we're going to talk a little bit about your PPE, your personal protective equipment. This is the stuff that you're going to wear to keep yourself safe. Nobody wants to get cancer. I know I don't. So this is one of them steps you can take to help prevent that. In general, the stuff I'm about to talk about, most of the labels require, but again, make sure you read and understand what you need to wear. You may need to wear like a N95 respirator when you're mixing. Who knows? Some of the stuff puts off some pretty good fumes like the prodiamine. It makes this real nasty yellow cloud. But at any rate, when you're mixing, these little goggles, I got them on Amazon, they come in handy. Put these guys on and make sure you have some thicker nitrile gloves. I believe a lot of the labels recommend 14 mil. Again, you can find these on Amazon. Just read your label, see what you need to get. When you're mixing chemicals, they're at their most concentrated form, so that's when they're the most dangerous. So that's why they generally recommend wearing such thick gloves and taking extra precautions for your eyes. One thing people sometimes don't think about is when they're mixing these chemicals, you want to make sure you're doing it below eye level, because if something does splash, that's liable to get onto your face. That's why when I mix, it's usually on the ground. Another good thing to have are just some basic nitrile gloves. I got a box of what is probably 500 or something from Costco. Pretty cheap, 150. Another good thing to have. You're gonna want some boots. You guys don't wanna be out there in your tennis shoes. Believe me, they're gonna get soaking wet and full of chemical. So you absolutely wanna make sure you have some boots. And one of the best things I recommend, these things are awesome right here. I'll link these in the description, are spray chaps. So these are gonna sit over your boot basically. They cuff on top and then you'll hook this into your belt. And all the chemical overspray and everything you're walking into is gonna spray onto these instead of onto your jeans or what have you. So this really reduces your chemical exposure, and I think they're like 50 bucks. So to me, it's a no-brainer to go and pick those guys up. All right, so next up, we're gonna talk about the weed killers themselves, probably what you've all been waiting for, but you know, it was just important to understand some of those other concepts before we got here. So the first thing we'll start with are our pre-emergents. So first one is probably the best one out there that they make. It's a product called Spectacle Flow, which is made by Bayer. And it is a pre-emergent herbicide that is highly effective. But this little guy right here, I think is, I don't know, $350, something like that. So the best thing you can do if you're not buying it professionally is probably just find a neighbor or another buddy who takes care of the yard like you do and splitting it with them. You can buy little containers that you can, you know, pour half of it in and keep the jar for yourself. And that way you're only spending about 150 bucks. And this stuff's applied at such a low rate, it's gonna last you for quite a while. So look at it as an investment to reduce headaches. Another product I use is prodiamine, which is right here. This is that nasty yellow stuff I was talking about. It's another pre-emergent. I typically use this one in the summertime, and I do a split application, which means I do 2 applications of the product at 2 different intervals of time. I do the same thing with the Spectacle Flow for the winter. What this does is it changes up the mode of action that you're using, so they each have different active ingredients. I think this is in Desaflam. I probably said that wrong. I know this one's prodiamine. And what this is helping to do is prevent your weeds from getting resistance. It's pretty rare, but it's just best practice. If you apply the same thing over and over and over again, eventually your target pest, being the weed, is gonna build a natural resistance to that chemical, and it's gonna become less effective. So that's one reason for swapping out the 2. Plus, prodiamine is really cheap, so you make your big upfront investment in this and Spectacle, and I think this is only like, I don't know, 55 bucks. So it's not a huge cost, especially compared to the Spec Flow. All right, so moving on, we're gonna talk a little bit about Celsius and Certainty. Everybody and their brother has heard about Celsius and Certainty. These are the best, this is your best spot spray combo right here. You don't wanna use anything else really. You can, sometimes let's say you have spurge, clover, any of those creeping type weeds, you can add a little bit of mansion in here to this mix and it'll take care of that. But for the most part, sedges and your broadleaf and grassy weeds, this is gonna take care of that for you. You shouldn't really need anything else unless maybe you need to add a dash of mansion in there for that spurge and clover. So as far as these go, you know, all of these, really you just need to read the label to understand it. I'm just gonna give you a brief overview, very surface level, and like what weed it's good for. You know, they'll all come for the most part with their own measuring device. So Celsius has this little cup that's got markers on here, and Certainty comes with another little spoon And you can just do a scoop out of there, read the label for the rate that you need. Moving on, the next one we're going to talk about here is going to be quinclorac. This guy right here, which is, I think, yeah, this is the measuring cup for this guy right here. Comes in a little cone. This is your crabgrass murderer. This stuff will smoke crabgrass with a surfactant. We'll talk about that in a little bit later. But this is what you want to use for that kind of stuff. It'll really knock out some broadleafs. Super aggressive on those. All right, so earlier we talked about Celsius and Certainty being the best stuff you can use for spot spray mixes, but sometimes doing a spot spray is not the most effective way to take care of your problem. You know, you could be out there for 3 freaking hours, man, just spraying each individual weed, but you could have so many that it's more effective to just do one mix and spray the whole yard in one go, right? Think about saving yourself some time. One good alternative to Celsius is a chemical called Change Up right here. It's a lot cheaper, and you could use this in a broadcast mix to go and spray all those weeds if you've got a bunch of broadleafs, and if you've got some sedges, kalinga, whatever, you can add in a little Certainty or maybe some Dismiss NXT. But that's just one thing to think about. These chemicals are like car care products. There's like 500 different ones for every different thing, right? Or if you ever heard of Chemical Guys, those people have like 30 products for like leather conditioner. It's so confusing. This is kind of similar, but there are some standout ones that work really well. But also think about what product you're buying, what the active ingredient is, and can I go find the off-brand of that ingredient? And if you find the off-brand, it's just like buying off-brand Zyrtec for your allergies, right? Same thing. You're going to pay a heck of a lot less, than buying Claritin or whatever. So just another thing to consider. All right, we talked about Mansion earlier. Again, it's good for your spurges, your clover. If you can tell by the way this little cylinder here looks, this stuff goes a long freaking way. It'll last you quite a while. So again, that's Mansion. All right, next up is Negate. It's Negate 37WG. This stuff right here is good for your POA. It's good professionally. I don't really know if it would be the best choice to use at home, but it is really cheap. And the reason I say that is because this stuff is mixed at an acre rate. You have to mix the entire bottle. And the reason for that is because it's comprised of different prill sizes of granules. And if you were to just try to make your own little mix by using a little, it's not going to be an even distribution of the chemical. So the label states that if you're using it in a spot application or under an acre of application, if you're not spraying 1 full acre in one go, it has to be mixed all together. There are some alternatives out there, so just do your research and you'll find some other weed killers that are good for POA. All right, next up on our list here is Dismiss NXT. This is another favorite. It's got a really fast burn down on those weeds, so it's quick to knock them out. Whereas, if you remember we talked about Certainty earlier, it's a lot slower, but it still works really good. So some guys will mix the two together, let's say Dismiss at a very low rate and Certainty at the normal rate, then you get a faster knockdown. But it's two different products. They roughly serve the same purpose. I wouldn't say you would need to really use one in one situation over the other, but unless you wanted to really knock them weeds out real fast, for the most part, I'm never in a rush to do it, but maybe you would be. So there's your choices. All right, next up is Ranger Pro. So remember earlier I was talking about buying the off-brand. This is an off-brand of Roundup. It happens to come in a really big 2.5 gallon jug. So this is some nasty, nasty stuff right here, guys. It's glyphosate, so you need to make sure you're careful when handling it, just as you should be with everything else. But if you cross-contaminate this in something or you accidentally put it in a mix that, you're just spraying your yard with some micronutrients or something like that, and this gets in there, you're gonna be killing your grass. So pay very close attention to where you use this. When you're spraying it, think about where you're walking, because if it gets on your boots and you're in your flower bed and you go walk in your grass, guess what's gonna happen? You're gonna have some nice little brown dead boot marks walking wherever you were going. So just something to think about. But this is a non-selective herbicide, so it's gonna kill everything you spray it on pretty much. Real good for flower beds, things like that. In the winter, you can spray it on Bermuda when it's dormant. Do your research on that, but it's perfectly safe. Even though it does seem a little scary, you can do it. All right, so, we've been talking about all these weed killers, so I'm just curious, what weeds are you guys struggling with? Leave it down in the comments below and let me know. Same goes if you have any questions about using any of these products. I'll try to help you out where I can. All right, so earlier we said we were going to talk about some surfactants, so let's get into that. You got two types that you're going to use. One of those is what's known as a non-ionic surfactant, and the other is a methylated seed oil, or MSO and NIS respectively. When you go to apply these guys, the label is going to specify what to use and when. Most of the time, you're going to be using a non-ionic surfactant because it's less aggressive than the MSO. These are basically spreader stickers, so they help that herbicide stick to the leaf and also work to break down the waxy coating that's on the blade of the weed itself. When you apply these, there's definitely considerations you need to have about the weather and temperature because, you know, one time when I first started out, I took some quinclorac and mixed it with MSO, and when I sprayed that stuff, it smoked the grass. It didn't kill it, but it dinged it up really bad. And if I had known more about the process with these chemicals, it wouldn't have been as bad. So you just got to be careful about the temperature and when you apply them, and the label will tell you at what temperature you can or cannot use them or when to expect damage. So that's a little bit about these two products. They're relatively cheap as well. You're not gonna break the bank going out and buying some of this stuff. So it's good to have both for different situations. For stubborn weeds, you'll find that you mix the MSO in. For less stubborn or just general spraying, you're gonna be using the non-ionic surfactant. All right, so now that we've talked about the herbicides and the surfactants, I just wanna give you guys a couple tips on mixing them up. One of those, this is my favorite one, I use literally all the freaking time, is this guy right here. So it's a quick lock attachment with a paint drill mixer on the end of it. Hook it into your drill, stick it in your tank, and have fun. It takes a lot of work out. You're not gonna be sitting there shaking anything. You're just gonna mix it up with the drill and call it a day. One thing about mixing these products, when you do it, you wanna make sure you use it when you're done mixing it. If you don't, the product's gonna settle out at the bottom of the tank, and then you've got an uneven mixture and application, and you might not even end up, you know, applying enough or applying too much, who knows. You just wanna make sure you spray when you're done mixing. One other thing that's good to have, just go ahead and get you some different containers. I think I got this from Home Depot. I got these cylinders off of Amazon, so you can see exactly how much you're putting into your tank, right? You know, you can't guess this stuff, so you gotta make sure you have the right equipment. You'll also notice this is all inside of a bin right here. When I mix my chemicals, I do it inside of here, because if you don't want to risk spilling something on the ground, on your yard, whatever, your wife walks in it, your dog, who knows, neighbor, we just don't want that to happen. So the smartest thing to do is just keep it all in one place. That way you can manage any spills if you do end up having one, and it's all contained in one area. The last tip I wanted to give you guys was to add in the surfactant last. Most of the labels require that, so make sure you read and see what order you can mix your various products together. The label is usually going to specify, hey, like put a gallon of water in there, fill it up halfway, then add your chemical, then mix it, you know, add in your surfactant last, whatever. All right, the next thing I want to show you guys is what sprayer I'm using. And when I'm doing yards that I can't get to with my machine or whatever, I use the Flowzone Typhoon, and I love this thing, man. It is awesome. It's got a pressure rate dial on the side here. It comes with a real good battery. It'll last you all day long. I don't have the wand hooked into it right now, so you can't see that, but it's got nice comfortable straps, so they're not playing around with the padding. I also use another system from Flowzone called the Storm. You might be able to see it behind me, but basically it's a swap tank system. So they give you these two gallon tanks, 2 or 2.5 gallon tanks. And you know, if I'm doing insecticides, spraying houses in one mix, I can have that in a separate tank, and I can have my herbicides in the other tank. And the benefit of the swap tank system is I can just unbuckle it from the bottom piece of the sprayer and swap the tank. It's awesome. So you really can't go wrong with the Flowzone sprayer. Any professional will tell you that. And that is what I'd recommend to you all day, 100% worth the investment. All right, the next thing I wanted to talk to you guys about is also very important, almost as important as knowing what you're spraying and what the label says, and that's calibration. You gotta calibrate your sprayer to know how much chemical you're putting out. This is especially critical for broadcast applications. When you're spot spraying, you know, most of the time you're gonna be mixing whatever the per 1,000 square foot rate is into a gallon of liquid. of water, and that's what you spray. But for broadcast, you have to calibrate it to know how much you're putting out and how much you need. Because if you don't know how long it takes you to spray 1,000 square feet, you don't know how much product you're putting out. This is gonna prevent over applying, under applying, wasting money, all kinds of things. So it's super important to understand that. The best place I think to learn how to do it, at least the simplest method, is by the Alabama Extension Agency, and I'll link that article in the description. I'm not gonna dive into how to do all that. It's really not that complicated. You just need like 4 flags and a tape measure. And basically, I think it's 18.5 square feet. You'll measure out a square and see how long it takes you to spray within that distance. So since we're talking about calibration, another really important thing to know about are the different kinds of nozzles. For your purposes, in general, you're gonna have a foliar nozzle and a soil nozzle. And it's they do exactly what you would think. If you're out there spraying weed killer, you don't wanna use a soil nozzle, because then you're gonna have a larger water droplet that's just gonna hit the ground, right? You're gonna wanna make sure you have a foliar nozzle, which allows that to disperse evenly over all those leaf blades. It's good for things like micronutrients, for plant growth regulator. Anything you wanna touch the leaf blades, you're gonna use that foliar nozzle. And your pre-emergence are where you're gonna be using that soil nozzle. And again, like I said earlier, they create a larger droplet of water, which gets into that soil zone much more effectively than using a foliar-based nozzle. I use 2 from T-Jet. They're the best manufacturer out there really for these kind of things. So I'll link those nozzles in the description for you if you're interested. All right, the next thing I want to talk about is the weather and how that impacts you. Man, I feel like every time I'm out there going to spray, it's gonna rain, or the wind's blowing at 20 miles an hour. It's never convenient, is it? But hey, that's life for you. But some things to think about on there, let's think about the temperature. How hot is it outside? Did I mix in MSO or NIS in my batch? Is it rated for that temperature, or is it gonna hurt my grass? Maybe it will. So you need to know how hot it's gonna get. How fast is the wind blowing? Is my chemical gonna blow all over me, all over my nice plants and my flower bed? That's known as spray drift. So if you're out there spraying at 20-mile-an-hour winds, that stuff is absolutely gonna go all over the place. Believe me, I know. I've even sprayed myself in the face. You got to be careful. That's why you wear those glasses and your PPE as well. But if you're spraying along one of your flower beds, a nice wind gust comes along and it pushes that herbicide, that weed killer, onto your nice plants that you want to keep alive, they're probably going to die. One thing you can do is spray them down with water real good to help with that. But you can avoid it altogether by looking at the wind conditions. One thing I wanted to add in when talking about spray drift management is getting yourself some kind of protective nozzle screening like this. This works great for things like Roundup. If you're spraying in your flower beds, getting those little weeds in and around your azaleas or your hydrangea bushes, this is great for that because it will prevent you from spraying the leaves of your ornamentals and killing them. Another thing is it gonna rain? If you apply herbicide and it rains an hour after you apply it, it's gonna wash all that stuff away. The label will tell you how long you need to wait before a rain event, so you can time it out. But again, understanding the weather will help prevent that from happening. But also at the same point, if you apply pre-emergent, you go and throw your prodiamine out there and it rains, that's awesome. As long as you're not getting a torrential downpour, because it's gonna help water in that pre-emergent. And as we know from reading the label, watering in pre-emergent is exactly what you wanna do. So, keep that in mind. The app that I use is called Greencast by Syngenta. It's free in the App Store. I'll throw a link in there as well. It's real good about giving you all the information. It's a little more details than you would probably need at the homeowner level. But hey, it never hurts to be informed. All right, so we've learned a little bit of everything you probably need to know to go out there and apply this. Where can you buy it at? That's probably the most important thing, huh? I've been saying there's some other important stuff, but if you can't buy the product, you're never gonna be applying it anyways. As far as in-person stores go, I either go to SiteOne or Ewing for anything like this. Online, I also do a little bit of business with websites like Do My Own and DIY Pest Control. They make it real easy to find what you're looking for. They're dedicated stores for this kind of thing. The last one I'd throw on that list is Amazon. And that's because they're just not really set up to sell this kind of stuff. You might be able to find it cheaper, but I like purchasing it from one of those professional sites because on there, it's really easy to find everything you need to know about the chemical. It's easy to find the label, all that good stuff. And otherwise, I get most of my stuff nowadays from my chemical rep. But You know, back in the day, they work just fine. They'll have good prices, and you can find just about anything that you need from there. All right, that's all I had for you today. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Maybe you learned something new. Fingers crossed you did, because there's a lot of information in here. But if it's your first time here, make sure you like and subscribe. Drop a comment in the comment section below. And otherwise, I hope you guys keep your yards barefoot approved, and we'll see you next time.